It was an overnight bus journey from New Delhi to Himachal Pradesh. My friend and I boarded around 8 p.m. A couple was seated just behind us. At first, nothing seemed unusual, except the woman's voice. She spoke loudly and continuously, almost entirely about herself, and often in a grand, self-important way, as if the bus were an audience to her. When my friend politely asked her to lower her voice, she ignored him completely and continued talking. At a short dinner stop, she got into an argument with the conductor, who had only requested her to hurry up. Later, as passengers reclined their seats to sleep, my friend did the same. She snapped instantly, ordering him to straighten his seat. When he didn't comply, her behavior shifted for the worst, like flashing a phone torch at him, lightly pushing the seat from behind, and then talking even more loudly. When I intervened and called her out, she became openly abusive and aggressive. The conductor stepped in and warned them clearly that if she and her partner repeated this behavior, they would be dropped off mid route. She didn't bother us anymore, but she began crying, portraying herself as the victim, ranting for the rest of the journey about our cruelty and how insensitive we were. That person was mean spirited, narcissist, and persistent in getting what she wanted. In other words, she was high on the Dark Triad. The Dark Triad refers to three related personality traits: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. These exist at a subclinical level, which means that people can score high on these traits without really meeting the criteria for a clinical diagnosis or a mental health condition. Even at subclinical level, the Dark Triad represents an antagonistic and disagreeable personality patterns that are related to social, emotional, and legal harm. It exists along a spectrum of functional to severely dysfunctional and antisocial. Narcissism is marked by artificially inflated self-views, a strong need for attention, prestige, and status, and a belief in entitlement and superiority over others. Machiavellianism centers on manipulation, exploitation, and self-interest, guided by the belief that the ends justify the means. Although distinct from psychopathy, it overlaps in its lack of moral concern and weak emotional bonds. Psychopathy is characterized by a lack of affect, callousness, dishonesty, cynicism, and insensitivity, along with antisocial behavior, impulsivity, and absence of remorse. When combined, individuals high on the Dark Triad composite scores tend to display grandiosity, aka narcissism, strategic manipulation, aka Machiavellianism, or low empathy or remorse, aka psychopathy. Although the dark triads are not interchangeable, they have been consistently shown to be positively correlated to each other. So essentially, there is something, a core, which binds them together. Now, what is that something? Researchers have tried to argue that when you look at personality profiles, there is the Big Five personality model, which has five different dimensions of personality. So there is openness to new experiences, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So people who score high on the dark triad tend to all be disagreeable. And then there is this another personality model which has been built on the Big Five called the Hexaco model, with another dimension added, which is honesty and humility. Now, all these people who score high on the dark triad tend to be dishonest and immodest. At an intrapersonal level, all of these traits focus on the present. It's all about getting the reward immediately, the gratification of your desire without thinking about the long-term consequences of your action. And this ultimately shapes harmful interpersonal interactions. A consistent finding across research is also aggression, which is a common theme that arises in all three different traits. When you look at narcissists, what really bothers or irks them is when they feel that their ego is being belittled or under attack from someone else. Bullying behavior is related to all of these three traits. In recent years, there's also been like an evolutionary explanation to why these personality traits occur and then persist for the lifespan of that individual. So, when you consider these social structures and the hierarchy that they exist in, people who are at the top usually are high on these traits, because how else would you reach that top? So many times we observe that these systems are corrupted, inefficient, broken, and such people who are able to manipulate, who are able to show no remorse, can actually reach the top. We have a lot of politicians and CEOs who tend to be high on the dark trait. And they can also be well adjusted in their real life when you look at it from afar. That's what makes it even more difficult to identify them. The dark triads show up strongly at work, often with mixed consequences. Narcissism is linked to unethical leadership and a strong need for power. Psychopathy is linked to a lack of corporate responsibility and low productivity. And Machiavellianism is linked to low commitment, manipulative behavior, and being perceived as abusive by subordinates. At the same time, these individuals often display socially desirable behavior, charm, confidence, assertiveness, leadership, and impression management skills, which helps explain why dark triad personalities are not uncommon in senior leaderships or CEO positions. The dark triad traits also shape how influence is exercised at work. Psychopathy and Machiavellianism are associated with hard tactics like forceful or aggressive strategies, while Machiavellianism and narcissism are linked to soft tactics such as flattery or strategic compliments. Despite the harm that they can cause to others, these traits do offer short term advantages, especially in a work setting. Such people favor short term opportunistic relationships rather than long term commitments. Narcissism is linked to having a preference for one night stands and friends with benefits. On the other hand, psychopathy is linked to having a preference for booty call relationships. Narcissism, in particular, is one of the most social amongst the three. It manifests itself in a need for having more wide and varied relationships, both romantically or otherwise, because it positions them at the center of other people's attention where they can reinforce their own self image or their sense of importance. Psychopathy reflects a more exploitative mating strategy where there is a general sense of disagreeableness and impulsivity. Psychopathy also predicts mate poaching behavior, which means trying to attract someone who is already in a romantic relationship to form a new sexual or a romantic one. These traits overlap with qualities linked to creative figures like self absorption, hostility, and arrogance. Narcissism shows a positive link with creativity, but Machiavellianism and psychopathy are largely unrelated to actual performance. Many high dark triad individuals see themselves as creative, even though there is weak objective evidence for it. In academic settings, psychopathy predicts exam cheating, while essay plagiarism is linked to both psychopathy and Machiavellianism. All three traits are also associated with prejudice, dominance orientation, and ruthless self advancement. The dark triad is tied to impulsivity, sensation seeking, gambling, and addiction. Narcissism and psychopathy are especially linked to risky behavior, with ego threat amplifying poor decision making and short term reward seeking. These traits predict lower empathy even towards animals, and there are higher reports of animal cruelty. Intentional animal abuse, driven mainly by psychopathy, is a strong warning sign for broader violent and antisocial behavior. In addition to the three traits, sadism or its subclinical manifestation, which is called everyday sadism, has also been clustered together by researchers to form the Dark Tetrad. Everyday sadism can be seen when people enjoy watching violent movies or even playing violent games as a social escape to manifest their sadistic traits. Higher scores in everyday sadism are associated with injuring others physically, emotionally, and psychologically, which is inspired by a hedonic value of being cruel. The Dark Tetrad traits are linked to self preservation and benefit seeking. People with higher scores in the traits are often motivated to seek power and control and to display success to receive social approval and esteem. These dark traits correlate with self direction thoughts, that is, a reduced openness to change, as well as a right wing political ideology, conservativeness, belief in conspiracy theories, and competitive view of the world. The point of this video is not to show antipathy towards those who are high on the dark triads, but to spread awareness and encourage recognition of these patterns, because you may come across such people in your work setting, in your college, or in your everyday life. Believe it or not, but 1 out of every 10 person is high on the dark triad.